I've been to the lake house regularly, keeping an eye on David. I saw the girl again, the one I told you about. She was playing outside. It makes for interesting reading, doesn't it? I can tell you're dying to ask me about it. Fire away. That's what it says. I can see you're confused. The police say that David is dead, fatally wounded when I stabbed him. The coroner says that David is dead. Everyone says that David is dead. There was even a funeral. But I know he's alive. He's buried at Henley Church. You can go see for yourself. There's even a headstone. One of your other patients was a pallbearer. I never forget her face. You should ask him. David wanted to have a talk about our relationship. Not something any married person wants to hear. He said he'd been with Iris for about a year and that he loved her. He said he didn't love me anymore. Which I know is a lie. You don't just fall out of love with somebody. I reacted badly. I grabbed the nearest weapon I could find, which happened to be the steak knife, and stabbed him with it. There was so much blood. I instantly regretted it. So I fixed him. It was about a week later. I brought David back to life. Not with voodoo, not with virginal sacrifice. I just willed it to happen, and it did. Dr. Dekker told me it was possible, but only if you're not buried. He says once you're in the ground, there's no coming back. But until then, you have a chance at resurrection. Yes, resurrection. But now that I've seen the results, I don't think there's anything holy about it. I think reanimation is more an accurate term. Like I'm an evil necromancer raising things from the dead. I think his brain was already decaying during the week that he was dead. Important bits. So when I brought him back to life, I didn't heal him completely. Just gave him life in the state he was in. I mean, he's hunting and killing things and trying to roast them on fires he can only light with matches, but that's about it. He's your basic Neanderthal. So I have a problem. I'm being charged with murder because the police don't know he's still alive, and I can't get David to vouch for me for obvious reasons. I think it would raise quite a few more questions than answers, which is why I'm hoping that you'd be able to help me. Considering the circumstances, I'd be grateful if you could see your way to declaring me temporarily insane at the time of the murder, to lessen my sentence. Because I'm not a killer, but I can't prove otherwise. You don't still think I'm a killer, do you, Doctor? At worst, it's manslaughter. I didn't mean to kill him, I just stabbed him a bit. And although he was dead for a week, I brought him back to life. Does this mean you won't help me? Was I temporarily insane? Thank you, Doctor. That's all I needed to hear. From you or Dr. Dekker. But Dr. Dekker wouldn't do that for me. He wanted something else. Dr. Dekker teased me mercilessly about my alleged ability. He didn't believe I'd reanimated David. Once he presented me with a dead mouse and commanded me to give it life again. I didn't, of course. It's not something I'd throw around lightly. He changed his mind about me eventually. And then he mentioned the girl. He told me he'd locked up a girl in the basement of his house, just for me, and he asked me to reanimate her. It was Iris. I said I couldn't reanimate something that wasn't dead, and he said that wouldn't be a problem. So I agreed. I just played along. I was hoping it wasn't real. I assumed it wasn't real. But he was offering me what I wanted, a temporary insanity diagnosis. It didn't happen. Dr. Dekker called me from his house to cancel. He was furious. He said that Iris had escaped and he blamed me for it. He said that I must have set her free after he told me about her. I knew it was all lies anyways. He was obviously titillating himself by reprimanding me. He knew I'd never want to speak to Iris again, so I couldn't prove it either way. Bryce was a pallbearer for David. He's also a gravedigger, I believe. Smuggling a body out of a funeral can be difficult, unless you pay the right people. Dr. Dekker asked if I could prove David wasn't dead, so I took him to the lake house. He saw that I was telling the truth. I can take you to see him too, if you like. Would you like to see David, Doctor? Very well. In our next session. A paper spike is an odd thing to use as a weapon. I suppose if it went directly into the heart, it might work. Or through his eye, or perhaps through the ear and into his brain. Or was it just a frenzied, bloody mess of a murder? Do you know, Doctor? You tell me. What could possibly explain that? I assure you, David is not a ghost. I've touched him. Since I brought him back, I felt that there was something different about him, something not quite right. I think it's his brain. But how ludicrous that you can bring someone back in the first place. It's like that book, Pet Cemetery. Funnily enough, he does smell of earth, but that's because he spends most of his time out hunting. If David doesn't exist, then that means that I really did kill him. He really is buried, and I really should be going to prison for a very long time. That just doesn't seem right to me. It's more probable that I reanimated him under Dr. Dekker's guidance. How astute, Doctor. Yes, I did say I hadn't seen Dr. Dekker outside of our sessions. That wasn't a lie. Our trip to the lake house was made during a session. I didn't speak to her this time. Something about her made me feel uneasy. I just watched her from the bedroom window. She'd caught a fish. She was holding it in her hands. I wasn't close enough to see, but for all intents and purposes, it looked as if the fish bit her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I caught a fish alive.